Hello everyone, welcome to this webinar on key account planning in Salesforce from the Gary Smith Partnership. I am Gary Smith and I'm your host today, and I'm delighted to say that also with me is Ben Affleck-Curry, my right-hand man. Ben, are you there and can you hear me?
I am there, I can hear you. Welcome everyone, thank you for joining us today.
You're going to keep us straight on, you're going to deal with questions and so on, Ben?
Yes, I will be. So if anyone has any questions, just drop a message in either the question box or the chat, and I'll either pass the message over to Gary or I'll get a response to you directly. But feel free to ask questions, do get involved. We are here to help, so by all means, get those questions, into us.
Yeah, and can somebody just raise a hand and just confirm that they can see my screen? Ben, can you see my screen okay?
I can see your screen okay, yep. I've seen some hands. Yeah. That'll come up as well, so everyone can hear us.
That would imply that people can hear us as well. Okay, so let's dive straight in, because there's a lot of things that we want to cover over approximately the next 30 minutes or so. So we'll try and constrain it to about half an hour. As Ben says, if you've got any questions, then jump in and ask them, and we'll attempt to deal with them as we go, really. So what are the key things that we are going to cover? We're going to talk a little bit about segmentation. You can't do key account planning unless you've decided who your key accounts are, and you've got a way of recording that in Salesforce. We'll talk about key account plans, how you can structure and record key account plans in Salesforce, and how you can enter that information, and also how you can track the outcomes in terms of what you've achieved for objectives, but also revenue, how you can track revenue against key account plans as well. Now, not every account is a key account, so what do you do about those other accounts, probably the large bulk of accounts, in fact. And I'll show you just a little bit of functionality to take a more rigorous approach to activities and logging calls and scheduling calls for the future, and the defining of the frequency with which certain accounts should get an outbound call or a visit or whatever from you. And of course, we will look at some reports and dashboards, and we'll look at some management information on key account planning as well, really covering all reports and dashboards, covering all of what we've just talked about. So we've got a lot to get through, so I am going to flick straight over to Salesforce. I'm going to use primarily the Lightning interface, but I realize some people are using Lightning, some people are using Classic, so a couple of times I'll switch back and forth between the two and just show you what some of this looks like in the Classic interface. But I'll start with Lightning, and we'll flick through backwards and forwards once or twice as well. So we'll try and cover everybody. So let's start with an account. I have one of my key accounts here, Pyramid Construction. So let's talk about that whole piece of segmentation first, because as I say, you can't put in a key account strategy. You can't segment the accounts unless you've got a way of recording that information in Salesforce. So what do we have here on this account? And I'm looking really at this section of the page layout here. We know it's a customer as opposed to a prospect. We know it's a customer from our direct as opposed to chart partner channel. You can use really whatever is appropriate to your business in terms of recording key accounts. Some people have importance of high, medium, and low. We have one customer that uses the seasons of the year, spring, summer, autumn, winter, to reflect the revenue strategy for their key accounts. What we're using here are two fields. We're using a target segment field and a current segment. So really we're differentiating here between where the account is, our relationship with them at the moment, and where we want them to be in the future. Now, the values that we are using here, there's a guy called Andrew Sobel, S-O-B-E-L, who's written quite extensively on key account management. He's really one of the world's gurus on key account strategies. And these are the values that he recommends or he frequently uses. So we're saying this account is a steady supplier. They regularly buy things from us, but we want to move them into that strategic partner, that real high level strategic relationship. So we're differentiating between where we perceive that account to be at the moment and where we want them to be. You can use whatever is appropriate to your business. A couple of other fields on here. This is a field that is automatically inserted if you download. We've got a free app on the App Exchange called the Auto Price Book Selector. Ben, could you maybe just post the link to that in the chat post? It's a free app. It's called the Auto Price Book Selector. If you search for that, you'll find it. And it's really a way of defining the default price book that should apply to certain accounts. You can define it account by account. Of course, you can upload that data through update your accounts through the data loader. But there's a way of saying, well, actually, for this account, we should always apply the strategic customer price book to this account. The other piece of information that we have there is this piece here, the top level account. Now, this is a code-based function. If you notice further up the page, I've recorded, this is the standard field for recording the parent account, and we have this trigger-based field here as well. And the reason for that is that many of you will be dealing with accounts that form part of an overall corporate hierarchy, perhaps quite a complex hierarchy in some cases, and we can use that function to have a look at the hierarchy. And what we're doing here is overwriting the standard account hierarchy page, if you're familiar with that. And we're on pyramid construction at the moment. You can see that we have a number of contacts there. It's part of an overall hierarchy. If I was looking at that, I might say, well, actually, this is if pyramid construction is a key strategic account for me. What about the head office? What about Wanstead Construction? We don't seem to know many people there. Maybe we should be elaborating out there and building additional contacts. And actually, what about these other divisions as well? So it's an extra way of looking at understanding how the account we're focused on at the moment sits within the overall corporate hierarchy. One final thing I'd say before we go and look at key accounts in particular is a mistake I see a lot of companies making is when however you define the segmentation for your key accounts, and people start to nominate their key accounts. A mistake I see very often is companies they select too many accounts to be the utmost strategic importance. It's much easier, I've found, to add accounts to that top level than it is to take them away. So there's a great temptation when you first go through your accounts and you start to segment them and so on, to say, oh, they're all strategic accounts, and you end up with 30 or 40% of your total accounts as being strategic accounts. My view is that, this is your really important ones, are your top ones, your strategic partners. That's your sort of 5%, somewhere between 5% and 10% of your accounts, and then you'll have a bunch of what we define as being steady suppliers, where you have an ongoing good working relationship with them. Then you have your experts for hire, which is where they know where you are if they want to come to you and so on. Actually, let me just talk about those other accounts just very quickly before we go and look at an account plan. This function here is a way of saying, well, that this could apply to strategic accounts and any other account, but it's often used for, shall I say, lower level accounts, if that's the right term. And we're defining here the frequency with which we should make an outbound call to this account. We've recorded automatically the last activity date. And if I just go in and log a call to this customer, I'll just say it was a phone call, I'll put in any details for now. And when that refreshes, there you are. You see the next scheduled activity is the 7th of March. That's because we're saying we should call these people every month. It could be every week, every quarter, every year, and that will automatically put in the next scheduled activity date. So if you're using a list view, in particular if you've got people spending a lot of time making outbound calls, get them using the sales console. It's a much easier way of using the interface to generate a list view based on that information you see there. So that's probably one for a different webinar, but get them using the sales console to manage that activity. So that's all very well. What do we do now? There are several ways you could record your key account information, your plan for dealing with this account, you could just create the fields here and type it in. What we've done is we've created a custom object called Account Plans. Let's have a look at the most recent one for this account. So this is the account plan for this quarter for pyramid construction. And you can see here we're pulling in the ultimate parent, the top level information. I'll come back to that number in just 1 second. Now, really, the fields, these are the fields that a lot of our customers use. Goals, large text area on the SWOT analysis, stakeholder management plan. One thing that often gets overlooked are the internal support required. What are you going to need in order to execute that plan? What are you going to need internally to support you? What's your short-term plan? Now, clearly, you can customize these fields. You can define the fields here that you think appropriate. I noticed on the call is Alan Morton of SBR Consulting. Alan and his team spend a lot of time helping their customers, not only with sales process development, but also key account planning and goal setting and so on. So if you want some generic advice on the sort of information you should be gathering and reporting on the key accounts, then Alan and his team at SBR are ideal people to speak to. So here's an example of the type that many of our customers use. So you configure this as you see fit, really. If I just scroll down a little bit, let me come back to these KPIs in 1 second. I just want to scroll down, and in fact, let's go and look at some of the related information about this. You can see that we have 3 objectives set for this account. So here are my objectives. So I've got my key account, and then I've got a separate custom object. If you want from a technical point of view, the account plan is a custom object. It's a master detail relationship to the account. The objective is a second master detailed relationship to that account plan, I should say. Let's have a look at an objective, and you can see this sort of information: target date for completion, its status, what are we trying to do? So a short sentence on what we're trying to do with this specific account. Our approach, what are the steps we're going to take to achieving this objective? And one thing that I found that to be very effective in many companies is to record some post-objective information as well. So this objective is completed, it's finished. In this case, we've been successful in achieving the objective, but what are the lessons learned? And I find that that's something that many companies could do much more effectively. So capturing the lessons learned either from specific objectives or indeed from the account plan as a whole, and reusing that information as a sort of continual incremental gains way of becoming more effective in managing your strategic relationships. In this case, we've got some information about the objective, what we're trying to achieve. We've got a status for the objective. We've got some comments from the person who owned the objective, and we've got some comments from the managers, from that person's reviewer, from that person's manager as well. So again, really a way of elaborating out the key account plan in a bit more detail. Let's just go back to the key account plan. So so here's our plan. Here's our related information over on the right hand side. Let me just talk about this next bit down before we come to the whole sort of KPIs and opportunities and so on. Let's talk about this bit here, account plan roles as well. And you can either go to it from the quick links in Lightning like that, or over on the related sections. So what we're saying here is that there are a bunch of people, a bunch of contacts at that key account. What is the role that these people are playing in relation to this key account? And if I could just show you, we have in this case, we have a Visualforce page that allows us to either add more contacts or define the different role that people are playing in relation to this account plan. So not every contact would be playing a role, but you can see here some examples of the different roles that people are playing in terms of helping us achieve our objectives from that key account plan. So similar to the concept of contact roles on opportunities, we're defining the involvement of different people in that key account plan. One thing that many of our customers do as well, if I just go to a contact, just want to show you one other way that people tend to look at contacts. Let me just go to the account knowledge. Probably a better way to show you what I mean is in most accounts, you would, particularly in your sort of key accounts, you will have a bunch of people there. So here are all the contacts that we've got at this account. And those people will have a variety of different job titles. What we also have on the contact page is a pick list, and we have defined the different roles that people might fulfill at that organization, because whether it's the head of operations, let's say for whatever we're selling, the whole sort of operations team are key to our sales process. Well, operations teams will have a variety of different titles and so on, and you know, the same with many other chief revenue officers and marketing officers, chief people officers, and everything else. So just define a standard way of articulating the role that these people are playing within your organization, and you can do some very nice matrix reports that show you what your coverage is within that account, or indeed within that organization hierarchy that we looked at earlier. So here we're defining the role that some or all of those people play on our key account.
We've got a question here, Gary. Mm-hmm. Someone has asked, do many customers create account plans for every customer, or just the most important ones? What are your thoughts on that?
I personally would create it for however you define the important ones, because if you look at this key account plan here, there's really, really what you're after here is quality rather than quantity, I would say. Every business will generate a disproportionate amount of revenue from a relatively small number of accounts, the 80-20 rule, I guess. So how you manage those important accounts is really critical. And there I think you're really looking for a high quality approach to those accounts. If you want a high quality approach, don't try to achieve volume as well. Really focus on the sort of intellectual input of identifying the obstacles, the threats, your opportunities, and so on. So what I would do, Ben, is I personally would just use some sort of key account planning tool like this for your really important accounts. Up to you what you define as really important and how many. Don't try to do it for too many. Easy to add than take away. I would use something like that activity tracking function to put a bit more rigor into the management of the other accounts as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Does that help, Ben?
Yep, we've actually got another one as well before we move on. I see the last and next activity date fields and the call frequency. Did you use that to just populate the date, or are you auto creating a task as well?
We are not auto creating a task. No, what we're doing is using the date to create a list view, which, as I say, renders much better in the Sales Console, which you might not realize you have, but most people certainly using Enterprise Edition or above will have. Some people using Professional Edition will have as well. If you go and look under Company Information in Setup, then scroll down to the bottom and it'll tell you whether you have access to the Sales Console. Very few people know about it, and even fewer people have it configured. But what we would do there is we've automatically updated the next activity date. It doesn't generate an activity. The reason for that is otherwise you become very quickly overrun with activities. It's difficult to see the wood for the trees. So it generates a date, and we have a list view in the console. You could use it in the standard Salesforce interface as well. We have a list view that says, well, actually show me all of the companies that are due for a call this week or today or however whatever it might be, and generate those and use that to say, right, it's time for me to make a call to this customer. I'll make the call and log a call or create a task if you prefer. Does that make sense, Ben?
It does. We've got another question if you're willing to answer it now, or if you'd like to.
Sure.
Yeah?
Yep.
The fields within KPIs section, are those just currency fields used to input, or is it being populated from account or ops?
Let's cover that now. Perfect timing.
Yeah.
So let's go back to my account plan. So all of this, though, that activity tracking thing does rely on a bit of code. I think, and that Visualforce page I showed you, where we're logging account plan roles, the role of people play on an account plan. That was built using a Visualforce page, but apart from that, everything is fairly standard functionality and configuration. As the person, I don't know who asked the question, but you're absolutely right. We've got some figures here. Where do these come from? So the target is manually input, but these are the figures, how much revenue we've won, the pipeline, the weighted pipeline, and so on. They are coming from the opportunities. Excuse me. These other figures, the won revenue, the pipeline, the weighted pipeline, are coming from opportunities that are automatically linked to this account plan. So what happens is the opportunity obviously has an account, therefore we know what account it is. The opportunity has a close date. So we know what the background code does. It says, I know the account, go and find me an account plan. If it exists, go and find me an account plan for this period of time, for this quarter, for this account, and it automatically links the opportunity to that account plan. And then in this example, we're rolling up the value of the amount based on the stage of the opportunity. One, it's probably self-explanatory, pipeline, and so on. And we're taking the weighted pipeline as well. So the figures on the right-hand side are really just formula fields based on that sales target and the weighted pipeline and so on. Now you see that in this case we are forecasting to be just short of that $25,000 target. That's based on what we've won, which is more or less 50%, which is coming up to 50%, and the weighted pipeline. So that's how we're forecasting, which obviously makes 24,000, which is why we're $1,000 short there. So and we have some charts which I find I'll flick over to that's probably a good time to do it actually. So just go to the let's go to the classic edition, because I know a lot of people will be using that. Here's the same information actually. This is what it looks like in classic. So the same dates and so on, the text information we had about describing our approach, and here's the metrics. And if I just scroll down a little bit further down, actually, right at the bottom, these are the opportunities that are automatically linked to the account plan and which roll up into these fields here. And you can see that we've got a little bit of inline chart there just to give you a bit of information about that, and that's our little $1,000. Looks like we're going to be short here. The chart on the right also says, well, okay, those opportunities are due to close within the duration of this account plan, which happens to be the first quarter, and it would depend on the sales cycle. You know, how long is our sales cycle? Well, I might, if it was 3 or 4 months, I might be a little bit concerned looking at, because 1/3 of my total pipeline, didn't do this deliberately, but 1/3 of it is in prospecting, 1/3 of it is in qualification, 1/3 of it is needs analysis. Are we really going to move those deals through the sales process quickly enough in order for them to fall within the period for this account plan? Maybe we are, but just looking at that information, I'd want to ask a few questions about that. So that's exactly the same information, same information in the classic edition.
We've had another question come in, Gary, if you'd like to have a look at it.
Sure.
Someone's just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the targets in your KPI charts.
perhaps the person who asked that question, if you just sort of care to elaborate a little bit more, the figure of 25,000 is manual input. I mean, obviously, if you had lots of account plans, you could upload that data from using the data loader, for example. But if I just update that to 30,000, so that's the only manual field that we're altering here, this sales target field. You can see that the chart has automatically shifted. As I say, this is what the one revenue is pulling from. Let's have a look at the opportunities, actually. So there, we've got a closed one opportunity for $12,000. We've got, these are the amount on the opportunity, as it happens, 15, 15, 15, 45, and we've got some weighted pipeline there as well, and that's what's rolling up into these figures here. And then we're just simply taking these these as percentages. The challenge that some customers have is actually either they don't use the amount field, or they have a custom field on the opportunity, let's say margin, for example, and it's the target, and all targets are measured against margin. That's okay. It's a fairly simple process to roll up that custom field, whether it's the margin or some other field, and the principle is the same. Your sales target doesn't reflect total revenue; it reflects the total amount of margin for this duration, for the duration of this account plan. And the same thing, so on the pipeline, so that if it's a pipeline stage, then those values roll up in exactly the same way. We also, just to perhaps finish on this topic, we also have some customers who, whether they use framework agreements, for example, or they are scheduling revenue over time. If you've been on one of our other webinars, you might have seen different ways to schedule revenue over time. So perhaps not all of your revenue comes to you. That $12,000 doesn't come to you straight away. It comes to you in a series of payments, or you earn the revenue over time. And we have an app, custom revenue schedule app for really scheduling that revenue over the time. And there is a way to link those schedules to the account plan as well. So, for example, if you're in manufacturing, for example, and you have framework agreements with people, you can have one opportunity at the start of the year, scheduled revenue, and your series of account plans that will go through the year. And it's the schedules rather than total opportunities that link to the opportunity amount. So I'm showing it in its kind of most simple format here. We're taking a sales target, revenue target, we're pulling up the amount from the opportunity. There are other ways to do it, based on, for example, a custom field on the opportunity, or a scheduled revenue as well. That was probably a longer answer than I intended, Ben. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fine. That is fine.
Okay. I will. We've just got a few minutes left. If we're going to try and keep it to the half hour, I will. Let's just have a look at the dashboard. So this is the Lightning dashboard. It obviously looks pretty much the same, or the same principle anyway, in Classic. So sort of things that really you want on the dashboard is this is you saw a version of this on that individual account plan. Here's the version of your revenue against target for individual account plans going across different companies. We talked a little bit about that ultimate parent field. So how much are we generating across different groups of companies? We can report on that sort of information. Same thing we might want to have a look by the pipeline as well. We looked at the segmentation fields. So how much business have we won by current segment? How much pipeline by segment? And this one is an interesting one. This really compares the from and the to segments. Now, if you look at this, you say, well, is this the current segment? So we have a number of accounts in the expert for hire. That's the kind of lower segment. Well, actually, that looks quite good, because we can see that we've got quite a bit of pipeline there that relates to accounts that we want to move to strategic partners. We've got quite a bit of pipeline that we want to move, where we want to move them up from expert to hire into steady supplier as well. So that actually is quite good news. We know how many accounts with and without account plans, some reporting on objectives, and that planned call frequency as well. So you can see we've got bulk of our calls due in our next set of calls are due in February and so on. Same chart in Classic, same dashboard, same sort of thing. So you need to be able to click on any of these charts, in whether you're in Classic or in Lightning, and drill down to the underlying information on your key account plans. So we've covered quite a lot there. Let me just finish on a couple of things. So we talked about the segmentation, the key account plans, how you're tracking outcome and revenue against those account plans on objectives and so on. We talked about activities and finding a robust way to manage activities in Salesforce against those other accounts. We looked at the dashboard. There we go. So a couple of other things. First thing to say is we have an app that we are launching next week that covers much of the functionality that you've seen here. Obviously, a lot of that you can build yourself, and feel free to do so if you want a quick and easy way to do it. Our plan is to charge a one-off payment of $3,000 for the app, with the exception for everybody who's registered for the webinar. Then we will install the app and help you set it up for $1,000. So a $2,000 saving on our standard price for our account management app, or everybody who has attended the webinar or registered for the webinar, then we'll also give you an hour of free consulting. If you want to set up a web meeting, we'll have a look at your Salesforce environment with you and just discuss account management and account planning specifically within the context of your business. And that's an hour of free consultancy work. So feel free to avail of that. Ben, I think we're going to send out an email. I know we've recorded the webinar. Do you want to just touch on that quickly? Yes,
so we will be sending out, as Gary said, sending out an email including a link to this entire webinar recorded. So if you want to go back and look back on anything, you can do. If you want to share it with anyone else, you can do that also. If anyone has any further questions or wants to get in touch with us, I've also just pasted our contact us link in the chat section. So by all means, get in touch there. And yeah, thank you very much for all your questions as well. We've had a bunch of questions, so yeah, really, really good.
Very much indeed. And we have our next webinar in a fortnight's time. We're going to talk specifically on the context of user adoption. So how do you maximize, if your users don't use the system, you're not going to get the benefits from Salesforce. So how do you maximize user adoption? We have a very structured way to address the topic of user adoption. So that's what we will be covering in a fortnight's time. So finally, thank you very much indeed for your time today. Thanks for some great questions as well. Ben, thanks for you for all your hard work organizing today. I know it takes a lot of time. Thanks very much, everybody.
No problem.
See you on the next webinar. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.